Good evening, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're zooming in from across the United States today. Welcome to this webinar about career opportunities at the U.S. Department of State. We are so excited to be here with you this evening. I'd like to thank the National Society of High School Scholars for this opportunity and for your continued partnership. My name is Tova Pertman, and I work in the Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, or as we call it, ECA. The ECA Bureau works to build friendly, peaceful relations between the people of the United States and the people of other countries through academic, cultural, sports, youth, and professional exchanges. Within the ECA Bureau, I work in the Office of Citizen Exchanges, particularly working with youth programs. And I manage a fully funded educational exchange program, a study abroad program for American and international high school students and young professionals. I encourage you to check out the various study abroad and exchange opportunities available to American high school students. And there are many, and quite a variety, at exchanges.state.gov/high school. That's exchanges.state.gov/high school. And I believe we're going to put that link in the chat as well. I hope to talk more about these opportunities a little bit later on in the webinar. So the Department of State is the country's oldest cabinet department, and it's responsible for U.S. foreign policy and international affairs. And it's made up of the Foreign Service, the Civil Service, locally employed overseas staff, primarily at embassies and consulates abroad, and contractor staff, all working in nearly 40 bureaus and over 250 embassies and consulates in about 180 countries around the world. I was hired into the Civil Service, so I'm a civil servant, and I work out of Washington, D.C. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the civil service is, what civil service professionals do a little bit later. We have a fantastic panel here tonight. So joining me on the panel are my colleagues Della Hareland. Della is a Foreign Service Officer currently serving as the Cultural Coordinator in the Office of Public Diplomacy in the Department of State's East Asian and Pacific Affairs Bureau. And we also have Salman Haj, who is currently studying Azerbaijani for his next tour at the US Embassy in Baku. Very exciting. We'll each tell you a bit about ourselves and what led each of us to the Department of State and the work that we're currently doing. But first, I'd like to ask my fellow panelists to briefly introduce themselves. So I'm going to pass it over to Della first. Della, if you could briefly introduce yourself and the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Tova. Hi, everyone. As Tova said, I'm Della Harland, and I'm the Cultural Coordinator in the Office of Public Diplomacy in the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs. I'm a Foreign Service Officer. I started with the U.S. Department of State in 2008, so it's been 14 years now. It's hard to believe. In that time, I've served in the Dominican Republic, in Peru, Taiwan, Beijing, and 3 separate times here in Washington, D.C. And right now, as the Cultural Coordinator in the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs, my primary responsibility is to be the liaison with the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, of which Tova is a part. And what I do is I advocate for more exchange programs for the countries in our region. And we have 25 countries and economies in our region, and 42 what we call posts, which are US embassies and consulates in our region. And so all of them have exchange programs, and they bring participants from their host countries to the United States. And we also send Americans overseas to those countries. So it's my job to advocate for more. And I have colleagues in the other 5 bureaus that do the same. We're always fighting for resources, but generally speaking, we love exchange programs because it really opens up a new opportunity for the people that participate in them, gives you a chance to know people all around the world, learn different cultures, society. So we love them. And thank you very much. And I hope to answer your questions today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Della. And over to Salman.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Salman. I come from Albuquerque, New Mexico. If anyone is here from the 505, feel free to throw a thumbs up or something. Yeah, I was in your place a few years ago, a long time ago actually. I was in the National Society of High School Scholars myself, and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. All I knew was that I wanted to travel the world, learn languages, and being a foreign service officer is a great way to do that and more. In high school, I took part in an exchange program sponsored by the Department of State. It's called the National Security Language Initiative for Youth, NSLIY. This is a great program if any of you are interested in learning languages. It's a fully paid scholarship by the Department of State to go abroad for a summer, a semester, or a full academic year, learn a critical language, anything from Arabic to Chinese to Russian to Turkish. And this can be done while you're in high school. There are also programs that you can do similar in college, which is, I did one of those. So I went to Egypt, Morocco, and Jordan for 3 different summers. And I studied Arabic intensively. While I was there, we went to visit the embassies in those countries, the US embassies, and I thought it was really amazing how we had representation abroad, and that Americans were serving their country while building relationships with other people and other nationalities. So I was really interested in doing that. And I went to Macalester College in Minnesota, where I really got more knowledge on how to work in the international relations realm. After that, I went to graduate school in American University. After that, I joined the Foreign Service through a fellowship called the Pickering Fellowship. This is another really great thing that you should start to keep getting into your plan for the future. If you're interested in serving in the Foreign Service, there are so many ways that the State Department will, for example, give you a scholarship for school, and then you can join the Foreign Service. So this is what I did. My first tour was Kingston, Jamaica. And then I went to Algeria, where I just came back from. And now I'm studying Azerbaijani. It's a 9-month course, and I'll be going to Baku as the Cultural Affairs Officer in late summer.
Great, thanks so much, Salman. So it looks like, I think we're starting to get some questions in the Q&A. Want to strongly encourage you. We have many participants joining us tonight, which is really fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to put your questions for the panel in the Q&A, not in the chat, but in the Q&A function of the Zoom. So please go ahead and start doing that, and encourage you to enter your questions throughout the session. And if you have a question for a specific panelist, please note that as well. And we're going to go around and each take questions throughout the session. But before we dive into the questions, the panel, we're each going to talk a little bit about our individual paths that led us to the Department of State. And I'll go ahead and start. I kind of growing up had always had an interest in the world, was always very curious. My parents both immigrated as teenagers from different countries to the United States. On my father's side, they were from Poland and Russia, and I was always so interested in the stories that my grandparents and my parents would tell about growing up during very difficult times and their immigration to the US. I remember in high school, we had an assembly, and there were individuals who worked for Peace Corps who came in and were telling us all about the Peace Corps and living in another country, immersing yourself in a language, in a culture, in a community, sharing about your life in the United States and learning about the host country's culture and all of the benefits of an experience like that. And it always stuck with me. Then I went on to college. majored in speech language pathology and audiology. Didn't really want to do that. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. Went on to work for a little bit. And then I finally said, you know what, I'm going to apply to the Peace Corps. I've been wanting to do it for years, never forgot about that presentation in high school. And I went ahead and did it. And I served for 2 years in the Republic of Moldova, which is a former Soviet republic, in the news a little bit today, independent country, bordering Ukraine and Romania. And it was a transformative experience for me. And, you know, I lived in a village. I was, very few people spoke English, so I had to learn Romanian very quickly. It was never very good, but I butchered it, but I could get by. Had the opportunity to build relationships and friendships with Moldovans, to learning all about them. They learned all about me. I would tell them about America from my perspective and my experience, and US culture, learned about Moldovan culture. Just really, it struck me during those 2 years. It was a wonderful experience. It was a very challenging experience. It definitely was not easy. But it really inspired me to continue to somehow work in the field of exchange and international exchange in some way. I taught English at a school in the village, and I was introduced to different nonprofit organizations, US organizations working in Moldova. They came and they trained the teachers at the school how to use the computers. At that time, there wasn't really technology in the schools. There weren't computers. It did amazing things, and it really brought something very new to the school, and it was absolutely inspiring to see. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to work one day in this field. And so after the Peace Corps, I was lucky. I got a job with the International Development Nonprofit Organization, and I, for the next 8 years, was managing a variety of international exchange programs, college level exchange programs, bringing international students to the US, sending Americans abroad, and a variety of other programs. Many of those programs were funded by the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs that I work for today. So I always appreciated the mission, loved the work, and really wanted to work within the Bureau at the State Department one day. And that is what led me to where I am today. So I'm going to pass it over to Della. You could talk a little bit about what led you to where you are today.
Thank you, Tova. That's excellent background to hear. And where do I start? I have kind of a non-traditional path to the State Department. I grew up in a little tiny town called Ely, Nevada, had 5,000 people in it. The most memorable experience of my youth with exchange programs was my dad was the mayor of the town and got invited to go to South Korea for a mayor's conference. And he came back and just raved about it. And that left an impression with me, apparently. I went to college at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, and I majored in computer science. So I spent 10 years working in information technology for Intel Corporation. My husband and I met in college. He also worked in information technology. This was in the early 2000s during the dot-com bubble. When the bubble burst, we quit our jobs, took our savings, and went traveling for a while. We went traveling on sailboat in Canada. We rode our bikes across the country, and then we converted a minivan into a camper van, took it to Europe, and drove around Europe for a while on a shoestring budget, if you will. That gave us the travel bug. We came back and were desperately seeking for someone who would pay us to live and work overseas. My sister-in-law said, "Have you thought about the State Department?" And I said, "What?" My husband said, "What?" Never heard of it. Much to our disgrace. But so we Googled it, of course. Actually, maybe it was Internet Explorer back then. And we saw, oh, wow. So you take a test. There's an interview. Okay, we could do this. So we set about doing that. We sat for the written exam in 2005. We took the oral exam in 2006. My husband got in first in 2007, and then a year later I joined him. So it was a long process. And I would say one of the driving factors for us, other than being able to live and work overseas, was that we wanted to do something a little bit more meaningful than, working in a place that sells a computer microchip, which is fine. It's important. It was great, but we wanted to be able to contribute something back. And we really wanted to be able to do that with communities and people overseas. And it's certainly been rewarding in that way. And I see that there was a question about, let's see, I think there was a question about, did we have any hesitancies about joining the Foreign Service? And I would certainly say yes, because it's a huge change in life. As soon as you join, then you're basically signing up to be moving every 2 to 3 years. And I can talk about that a little bit later, but I have 2 kids, they're 10 and 12. With children, it becomes more difficult to move that often. And so if anyone's interested in that, I can talk about more of that later. And now I'll turn it over to Salman.
Yeah, thanks. I think I got ahead of myself and explained the process already that I took to get to the Foreign Service, but I can shed a little bit of light on the motivation that I had. I'm an immigrant. I came from Tanzania. I was 7 years old when I got on that plane across the ocean. And I remember going to the US Embassy, getting our visa, and then experiencing a new country. It's funny, we landed in Newark and I thought we were in New York, and I was like looking for the Statue of Liberty and, like the typical Ellis Island kind of atmosphere. But it was really amazing to think about that experience and then try to consider the Foreign Service and see if I could give something back to my new host country. And thinking about immigration also is a subject that I'm really passionate in as an immigrant myself. My first tour was, and most Foreign Service officers have to do what's called a consular tour. They have to work in the consular section of an embassy or a consulate, where they're either interviewing for immigrant or non-immigrant visas, or they're helping American citizens that are in some kind of trouble or that need passports, etc. And that's what I did in Jamaica for 2 years. There are tons of Jamaicans that live in the United States. There are tons of Americans that come to Jamaica on holiday. So I was responsible for interviewing a lot of people every day. I think over 100 people we interviewed each day, and doing the visa interviews, getting them their immigration paperwork, speaking to American citizens that had a baby and the baby needs a birth certificate or a passport. And that was really fulfilling to see, for example, a child that was my age immigrating to the US to be with his family, and you being responsible for kind of getting him there and getting his last step, getting him his passport or visa to go to the United States, and wishing him good luck. That was a really special place to be in. I am not a consular officer. We have in the Foreign Service different specializations, which maybe we can cover later on. But I focus more on the public diplomacy aspect, which is exchange programs, cultural heritage preservation, like protecting or kind of helping historic sites becoming rehabilitated, and language instruction, helping other people learn English. So our office manages that, which is still an amazing way to make a difference in other people's lives. So I think to me, that kind of motivation is still really evident. I like the question about hesitancy of joining the State Department. Kind of one of them for me was having a dog. I knew from whenever I was really young that I wanted a dog, many dogs. I love dogs, I'm a dog person. And I got my dog in Jamaica on my first tour. A tour is what we call our, our stint. Each place we go to, we go on a tour. It's obviously not the same thing as a tourist tour, but anyway, when I was in Jamaica, my second month there, I went to the shelter. I got my amazing, adorable dog. She's 7 years old now, and I didn't know at the time that it's probably going to be a little bit difficult to travel with a 50-pound dog everywhere. But I can tell you that a lot of us have dogs and cats. Tova, you have 3 dogs, right?
I have one dog.
One
I
dog.
love
Oh,
dogs. If I could have 3, I'd have 3. If I could have 10, I'd have 10.
right. Sydney has 3 dogs. She's the one managing this whole call. So a lot of us have dogs and cats, and we travel with them, and the career kind of makes it work, which is pretty amazing to me. So.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, well, let's jump into some of these questions. I see some questions already in the Q&A. Please continue to add them. We're going to start off with one. What is the difference between the civil service and the foreign service? And I think I will, as a civil servant, talk a little bit about the civil service, and then I'm going to toss it over to my colleagues who are both in the foreign service to talk a little bit about the foreign service. So as far as the civil service professionals are federal government employees who work in various agencies such as Health and Human Services, Department of Education, Department of Transportation, Department of Commerce, and many others, including the Department of State. At the Department of State, civil service professionals advance foreign policy abroad through many different types of work, particularly working from the United States. So as opposed to the foreign service, the civil service employees work in the United States in Washington, D.C. or other cities throughout the country. So civil service professionals at the Department of State work on everything from improving trade opportunities for U.S. businesses, helping American couples adopt children from overseas, processing passports and visas, working on managing exchange programs or any type of exchange, such as the work that I do in ECA, and much, much more. There are lawyers within the State Department and the civil service, people working to monitor human rights issues. There are all kinds of finance, there are accountants, pretty much anything you can find in the civil service and in the Department of State. And we typically work from within the United States. We're based in Washington, D.C. or in other parts of the U.S. In short, that is what the civil service and what the civil service professionals do. I'm going to toss it over either to Salman or Della to talk a little bit about the foreign service.
Della, did you want to take this one since you've had experience in DC as well? I think she might be frozen.
Yep.
Okay, so
go ahead, Salman.
Yeah, in my opinion, there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of differences, and a lot of overlap. For example, a foreign service officer can definitely work alongside civil service in DC. That's where the bulk of our operations is, and everyone that I've talked to said they really recommend working in DC, seeing how things are done from here. Of course, the travel is one aspect that differs. I believe civil service officers do get to travel. Foreign service is mainly based abroad, and we can stay in the US for a maximum of 6 years at a time, if I'm not wrong, and then we have to go back out. So our lives are based abroad in all these different embassies, but we can work back home in the US. So this is a great question that I'm also trying to understand, is the difference between civil service and foreign service. And it's good to know that you can switch. I've seen civil service go to foreign service and vice versa is possible as well. Della, I think, is back. Della, if you wanted to share more about civil service or foreign service differences.
Talk about cones already, Salman. I'm sorry, I got dropped.
Oh no, I didn't talk about cones. Maybe if you wanted to, that's a good one.
Okay. And did you talk about specialists?
No, great. We have a question in here about that. So
okay. So So probably Salman explained that we have to move every 2 years, 2 to 3 years. We change jobs. We have different cones. So usually for most folks, when they take the Foreign Service written exam and take the oral exam, then they have to choose which cone they want. And we have public diplomacy, which I am also a public diplomacy officer. And we work on exchange programs. We also can work with media relations. So that's generally speaking what we do. We have political affairs, economic affairs officers, and they do just what it sounds like. So they work on policy. So it's either political policy where they're working primarily with government to government contacts, politicians and that sort of thing. And then the economic officers are working on all the economic policy, you know, trying to figure out how do we make trade deals, those sorts of things. And then we have management officers, and they're the ones that run the embassies and the consulates. So they make sure that we have housing. They make sure that all of the facilities for the embassy and the consulate buildings are up and running. They have a thing called motor pool, which is transportation that's used by the embassies and the consulates. So lots of management things, HR related issues, human resources, finance issues. They handle all of that. So that's management. And we also have consular cone, which is what Salman described, which is where either you're working on American citizen services overseas, so providing things that people need overseas, like consular report of birth, birth certificates, unfortunately, death certificates, visiting people that are unfortunately in prison, so some of those kinds of things. And then working on visas, so both non-immigrant visa adjudication and immigrant visa adjudication. So that's the gist of the cones, and that's for Foreign Service generalists, which Salman and I are. We also have specialists, and specialists are people who have degrees, maybe higher degrees in certain areas. So we have doctors, nurses, psychiatrists, IT specialists, security specialists. That we have the whole diplomatic security office, which is in charge of the security functions for the embassies and consulates. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, but those folks also serve overseas primarily, and they support the embassies. So that's generally how it works. And there was a question in the chat about, can all the people who are employed at the State Department travel or work overseas? Primarily, it's Foreign Service officers that work overseas, but there are occasionally opportunities for civil service to go temporarily. We call it TDY, temporary duty, overseas, to fill in gaps in staffing and to help out for big events. Maybe the president's visiting somewhere and that particular embassy or consulate needs help. So hopefully that answers that question. Over.
Great, thanks, Della. And I can also say, as being in the civil service, that in addition to temporary duty overseas potentially, there are also opportunities to travel every now and then internationally to support and manage whatever program or initiative that you are working on. So I'm going to take a question. Sophia has a few questions. I'm going to take one of them, and we could all add to it if you like. But she's asking, what do you find most rewarding about your work abroad? But it could be your work here or your work abroad. I would say, you know, I manage a youth exchange program, specifically the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange Program, CBYX, which is a fantastic program. It's a bilateral program. So we send American high school students and young professionals to Germany for one academic year, and then we bring German high school students and young professionals to the US for one academic year as well. They live with host families. They go to high school or college. They're immersed in their community. The young professionals, which is a component of the program, they actually work. You know, the Americans in Germany, they will work. They'll have internships in their field of study. I would say my most rewarding, there are a lot of things that have been rewarding, and I've been with the State Department for a little over 3 years, so not too long, but seeing the impact of these exchange programs, not just on our participants, but also on the host families and the communities that are impacted by these programs. Our American high school students, for example, come back from Germany after a year speaking German. And it is not a requirement to speak German to be selected for the program. The number of the amount of skills that are developed over the course of the year, not just skills that you can use professionally or educationally as you continue on to college, but personal development, confidence building, self-esteem building, communication skills increased, all kinds of growth that happens when you take yourself outside of your comfort zone, and at such a young age, you live in another country with the host family and are immersed in another community. The friendships, the relationships that are built, that our participants form with Germans all throughout the country. They come back, they keep these relationships going. Sometimes they last a lifetime, and these linkages are very, very important. And I'd like to say diplomacy is not just government to government, it's people to people. And people to people exchanges are so important and impactful because they really, truly build friendship, they build relationships, they enhance, it's all about mutual understanding, learning about another culture, learning about another society, sharing your culture and society, and really learning about each other, which really leads to friendly relations and peace overall. So seeing these impacts, not just in our American youth that go abroad, but also in our international students that come here, it's really, really quite rewarding and really life-changing opportunities for these participants. And while I have the opportunity, I really would like to encourage you, if you have an interest in studying abroad, if you have an interest, not even for an entire year, our office and the State Department offers a variety of study abroad, fully funded opportunities for American high school students and young professionals, college students as well. Again, go to the website exchanges.state.gov/high school. We have a number of programs, CBYX for Americans to go to Germany. We have the Flex Abroad program, which is an academic year program that goes to certain countries throughout Eastern Europe. We have the Yes Abroad program. We have the NISLE Y program that Salman participated in, the National Security Language Initiative for Youth. We have short-term study abroad or exchange opportunities for American students as well, for 3 weeks, for 4 weeks, not just academic year. If you don't want to go for a full year, we have short-term programs as well, fully funded merit-based programs. We strongly encourage you to take a look, see if it's of interest to you. They really are life-changing growth opportunities and will really excellent experiences. So strongly recommend that for you. But as far as going back to the initial question, with regards to sort of, your most rewarding experience thus far, I'll pass it over to Della. You want to take that one?
Thanks, Tova. It's the most rewarding experience has been working with the exchange program participants and the alumni of our exchange program. So anyone who has participated in a State Department funded exchange program, when they get done with the program and they return home, we call them alumni, much like you graduate from college and then your university will call you an alumni. So that we do the same thing, and just like your university will try to keep in touch with you forever and ever, we do the same, though we are not looking for financial contributions. Instead, we're looking to keep you involved with the U.S. embassies and consulates overseas. And so the most rewarding thing that I've done is to keep in touch with those alumni and to talk with them about their exchange experience. And people will come back from their experience in the United States and they will say things like, so this happened in China all the time. They'll say, I met with Americans and they were very open with me and honest with me. And they told me their opinions. And I was shocked because they often disagreed with the government. They disagreed with the policy of the U.S. President at the time, or they disagreed with, State Department foreign policy, and they told me about it. And that was on the program that you all were sponsoring. And so they were in shock that they were exposed to all these different points of view, and not all of them were the point of view of the current, of the U.S. federal government, and not all of them were consistent. And that is really the point of our exchange programs. We want people to come here and learn about U.S. culture and society. And when we send Americans overseas, we would like for the same, for you all to learn about your host country, the culture, the society, the history, so that there's an understanding, that you say, oh, this is why things, this is why they do the things that they do, and they do them in this way. And there are different ways of looking at problems. But in the long run, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all just trying to live and have a good world to live in, a world that we're taking care of, that we're protecting for our children and our grandchildren. And so I just really think that that's what the exchange programs do, is they connect us in that way, make us realize that we have differences, but those differences are kind of fun to discover, but really a lot of similarities. So, thanks, Tova.
I did want to, I think Sophia had a second and third part to that question. Basically, how we manage our loyalty to the United States or relationship with the US and assisting other countries, and how compromise happens in that kind of relationship. So first, I think assistance can be many forms. The US government also has USAID, United States Agency for International Development. They have their own foreign service officers that work in many countries with us at our embassies. And they are in the field giving financial or other kind of assistance to governments or other organizations in those countries. So for example, in many of these countries, the USAID helps them with, for example, vaccines or educational development, training teachers or the educational staff in the Ministry of Education. Whereas the State Department does a lot of the work with the decision makers in that country. So for example, working with the Ministry of Education on a much more close basis in developing an English curriculum, or working with exchange students that go to the United States, learn all these great skills and credentials, and then come back and supporting them in their country to build their communities. So we have a different, we contribute to the same mission in the country, but we have different ways of providing assistance or supporting those local populations. And I think it would be surprising for a lot of people to know that a lot of the times the goals are one and the same for both the United States and that country, because we are supporting them in themes such as entrepreneurship. We're helping them build their economies while helping US businesses. So for example, we have exchange programs where young entrepreneurs come to the US. They work in these incubators and learn all of these ways to become a great entrepreneur from leading US businesses that then have a relationship with these exchange participants when they go back home. And then the US businesses can now have a relationship with a new market in a new country. So that's just one example. And there are so many other ways. We have programs such as Tech Women and Tech Girls. These are for women and girls that are interested in technology. They come to the US from all over the world. They go to Silicon Valley or Virginia Tech, and they meet all of these leading tech companies and startups, and learn how to kind of go back to their countries and start getting involved in technology and doing what they love. And that's really important to the US too, because we are the home of Apple and Google and all of these great Tesla. We have a lot of private interests in technology. So when it comes to compromise, there are a lot of times where, for example, you have to really negotiate with the government. And this is the job of a diplomat, is trying to convince them that this is the best thing to do for both of us. Both of our interests align, and this is what needs to be done. But you really have to be creative. For example, in Algeria, we wanted to rehabilitate a tomb that was falling apart. So they, like Egypt, have their own kind of tombs and pyramids. And the US Embassy was really interested in revitalizing one of the tombs with the help of the United Nations and UNESCO. But of course, UNESCO and the State Department only have this much fund, a certain amount of funding available to do this. So we needed to come up with the rest of the funding. So the Algerian government gave part of it, and we had to be really creative and look at private companies that could fund the rest of this amount. So it's really important to, when you become a diplomat, you have to look at all the relationships that the embassy has, not just with governments or institutions or the UN, but also private companies, the American Chamber of Commerce, and helping American businesses that way too.
Great. I think we'll continue to kind of go around and each take questions. Della, would you like to go next? Pick a question.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to take these questions about degree programs. So there's what's the most beneficial? What degree is the most beneficial for working with foreign affairs? And then, do you have opportunities for programs for those that aren't going to college? And I don't know if that means careers or exchange programs, but I'll try to take it from the career standpoint. So for the Foreign Service in particular, there is no requirement to have a degree. So you just have to take the test. And then once you pass the test, I think there's some statements of interest you have to write. And if you get through all of that, then there's a day-long interview process that we call the oral exam. And then you have to go through a health exam, a physical, to make sure that you're ready to serve anywhere in the world. And then they do a background check on you that takes forever. And then you get on the registrar, and then you wait until there's an opening and then call you into the next class. We call it A100. It's named after the first, I guess, the room number of the first Foreign Service class that there ever was, or something like that. But you get called into your A100 class, and then you're officially in. But you don't need a degree for any of that. You just have to pass through all of that gauntlet of tests and interviews. And my advice to anyone is just keep trying. It's not easy. It doesn't happen the first time for most people. So just keep trying. There are study groups, there are study guides, there are a lot of information out there about how to prepare for it. So I would say go for it. So as far as what degree is most beneficial, you don't need one. A lot of people are have studied international relations. Maybe they've studied politics, maybe they, whatever, economics, that's fine. I told you I was a computer science major. The more we're trying to hire a more diverse set of people, and that includes a diversity of backgrounds. So I encourage all comers, please give it a try. And then the other question was, I think that covers that. Opportunities programs for people not going to college. And if that's careers, then you can join the Foreign Service without having a college degree. But if that's exchange programs, if you're already, what am I saying? I'll give you an example. One of the programs that we manage in our region is called the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative. And it is for young professionals ages 25 to 35 from Southeast Asia. So they're from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So there are 10 members of that organization. And then we also include Timor-Leste. And so we get participants from those 11 countries who come to the United States. There's 2 exchange programs. One is academic, where they're here for an extended period of time. I think it's about 10 months. And then there's another program, which is a professional fellows program, where they're placed in an organization and they have a fellowship and they're working alongside their peers in the United States. There's no degree requirement to participate in that program. And the people who host them, the Americans who host them, then have an opportunity to apply to go travel overseas to continue working with the people that they hosted for a short period of time, usually about 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks. Again, for those Americans who participate in that, there's no degree requirement. So I think it's fair to say we have many programs, exchange programs, where you don't have to have gone to college or gotten a degree of any kind to participate in them. We try to make opportunities as widely available as possible. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to combine a few questions here for sort of short questions that I'll take. What is from an anonymous attendee, what is the process like for applying to work at the Department of State? So I can answer as someone who applied to the civil service. The first thing that I did was I went to usajobs.gov, and perhaps we can get that into the chat. That is the website where you can go to find federal jobs. And you can filter, you can select various federal agencies, you can look for the Department of State. And it'll show you what jobs are available and the job announcements, the position announcements, the different bureaus, the different offices, the different type of work within the State Department that's available. If you're interested in a specific position, and this process, is evolving and changing. So it might be a little bit different by the time that you decide to apply to work at the State Department. But they may ask you for a resume. And if that's the case, they do offer, they have videos and tutorials on tips and best practices for putting together a resume for a federal position. Be authentic, be truthful in your resume, advocate for yourself, because if you don't advocate for yourself, no one else will. But be authentic and be truthful. And then there's a process, you apply, it's all electronic through the usajobs.gov portal. You apply for a specific position. Each State Department civil service position has a specific grade level. So the GS scale, GS 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, the higher the GS number, the more experience that tends to be required for that respective position. That could be either work experience or depending on your educational background. But you apply through the system. The first step is that your application gets reviewed through the human resources at the State Department in a specific office. And then if you make it onto a short list, you get a call to either have a phone interview or an in-person interview or both. And then depending on the position, if you're offered the position, it's pending your acquiring of a security clearance. And that all depends on what the position is, what level security clearance it may require. And that could be a timely process. Once that is secured, then you start the job. So that's the process of, in a very short nutshell and more simplified nutshell, of applying to work at the Department of State. Those are for full-time positions. There are also a number, and this is addressing another question, of internship opportunities at the Department of State. And I think we may have already put a link in, but we could probably do that again. We do have on our website descriptions of each of the internship opportunities that are available. There are opportunities to intern in person at the Department of State. Usually the internships are for a season, for the summer, for the spring, for the winter. You can apply to be an intern in a specific office with a specific program if it's available. And really, it's a great experience to learn what happens in the State Department. What's it like to be there? What is the work that's going on? And to really learn about a specific project or office and what it is that we do. There are also virtual intern opportunities as well. So this is a really interesting opportunity that you can serve as an intern virtually. So you could be, you know, our office had an intern who was in China. He was on a program in China. He was living there. The time difference was immense, but we worked it out, and he worked with us. We worked together with him on a variety of projects virtually. So there are virtual intern opportunities as well, and that should be outlined on our website. So I encourage you to take a look at that. There may be some opportunities for high school students as well. Definitely, if you're in college, take a look.
Tova, on internships, I see some questions on summer internships for high school students. And there is one called the Pathways. I'm going to write the link here. It's called the Pathways Internship. And for those of you 16 and older, you can apply. And these Pathways internships go up to even college age students and above. So they're really competitive. And it takes a long time to hear back. And I'm not sure if they also need a background check too, but these are just some of the ways that you can get involved. For high school students, I'd really recommend focusing on what you can do in your community to make your background stand out when you eventually do apply for the Foreign Service. One of the things you can consider doing is talking to the diplomat in residence. These are diplomats who are based in institutions around the United States with a main purpose of advocating or talking to students about the State Department and what it is. And you can go and search diplomats in residence on the State Department website and see if there's one near you and arrange a meeting. Another thing is to look in your community at the ways you can get involved with, for example, a congressional representative. You could intern in their office for the summer and kind of understand how it works, how the US government works. You could get involved with an NGO that has an office, for example, working with refugees or teaching English to immigrants, or so many different ways that you can get involved. Learn a language for the summer. Look at one of the programs that we've put in the links there. With fellowships, you'll also be able to do internships for the summer at embassies. But again, those will get closer to when you're in college. I also see a question about non-US citizens and if there are any opportunities available at the State Department. Most, especially for high school students and college students, you need a US citizenship to participate in any of these programs. This is because if you were to travel to an embassy, you would be going as a US citizen, you would need a relevant visa, and for that you would need those documents. And also working at an embassy sometimes requires a background check, which is much easier to facilitate once you're a citizen. So otherwise, you can also go back to the country that you're a citizen of and then apply to work at the US embassy in that country, which is possible. So I suggest that you continue and become a citizen and then consider one of these programs.
Great. Pass it on to you, Della. There's a question you'd like to answer.
Sure. Maybe I'll answer a set of questions. So there is a question about what's a normal day of work like? So I'll take that one. And then maybe also talk about, just answer the question, would you say these jobs are financially stable? So I can answer both of those. So a normal day of work. So when I'm in Washington, D.C., as opposed to being overseas, a normal day of work involves quite a bit of email and meetings And, these days, a lot of the meetings have been, online on the computer. But we also typically have in-person meetings. But every once in a while, like today, I get to go out and meet with exchange program participants. So I met with some high school participants in a program called Yes, and that was very wonderful. They were they were folks from all over the world. They were here for an academic year program. They had come to Washington, D.C., not only to see the sites, but also to participate in a civic education workshop. So it was just lovely to meet with them. And I get to do that, maybe twice a month, 2 or 3 times a month these days, which is really nice. When I'm overseas, the majority of my time is spent meeting with people. So I'll be, I do a lot of public speaking. I meet with a lot of exchange program participants before they come to the United States. Then after they return home, I award federal assistance to civil society groups, and I get to meet with them to see how their programs are going and what they're working on in the country. I get to travel around and see how cultural heritage preservation projects are coming along. So a lot of in-person, face-to-face interaction when I'm overseas, and a bit more paperwork when I'm here in the United States, if you will. As far as, is it a financially stable job? Yes, this is a good job. We have good pay, we have good benefits, health insurance. It's stable in that we're not like a startup company that is maybe going to make enough money to pay the salary of their personnel. No offense to startup companies, but we get paid. We can feel fairly confident that we're not going to get fired from one day to the next. It's a pretty stable job, and that's nice, especially if you're trying to support a family, you've got loved ones to take care of. So it's a good, stable job. Over.
All right, well, it looks like we only have about 2 minutes remaining. This has been a lot of fun. I feel like we could go on for another 30 minutes, another hour, but I think we'll wrap it up. Maybe we'll each say a few words in closing. I'll start with, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been really, really wonderful to be here with all of you tonight. For the high school and college students out in the crowd, I hope this has been enjoyable for you. I hope that you learned something. I hope that it's piqued your interest in international affairs, potentially in a career at the Department of State, whether in the civil service or the foreign service. It may have also sparked many more questions. Encourage you to really check out the links that we've put in the chat. I think they're very useful. There's a lot of information, and I wish all of you the best with whatever your future has in store for you. I'll toss it over to my colleagues.
You want to go, Salman, or you want me to go?
Go ahead, Della.
Okay. I just want to repeat what Tova said. Thank you so much for being here with us. I hope that you found this to be useful information. I encourage you, as Tova said, to look through those links, read a lot about the different opportunities that are available for you, and try, and keep trying. Persistence pays off. I promise you. If you apply for some of these things and it doesn't work out the first time, just keep on applying. Learn from the experience and keep on going. I've met so many people, they've tried to get into these different programs 5 or 6 times, finally they got in, and it's just so worthwhile. So I encourage you. Best of luck with everything, and thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. And just to remember that the U.S. State Department is super diverse. We have people from all over the United States, studied from all kinds of different universities and different programs. Don't let what you hear from one person affect the way you think about the Foreign Service and get intimidated. You don't have to go to this school and study this program to get into the Foreign Service. I've met people who have gone, who have studied really incredible things, English literature, science backgrounds, whatever it is. The State Department really digs that. They like diversity in the embassy and having different points of view and different experiences. So do what you want, study what you want to do, and go where you want to study, and be the best at it. And it will all come together if you have the motivation. And we've kind of given you a lot of different programs to research. Maybe one of those will get you interested and get you more experience. But really, everyone has their own path to make and follow, and that will get you to where your destination is.
Thank you, everyone, so much.